On today's show, who starts for the Cavs at the 3 in their post-Donovan Mitchell trade starting lineup? That's all coming up today, as well as some other chatter. I want to thank you for making a Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Spotify or Apple Music. I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA for places like Diamond Up Rocks and Explanations for the Sword. My co-host is Evan Damrell, covering the Cavs and the Cleveland sports scene at large for Facebook's Right Down Euclid primarily. Producer Jake Stevens is not with us today behind the virtual glass, but he is producing. Today's show is going to be all about who completes the Cavs' new look starting lineup post Donovan Mitchell trade. I think we can correctly and everything right in ink that the starting five health provided is Darius Garland at the 1, Donovan Mitchell at the 2, Evan Mobley at the 4, and Jared Allen at the 5. So that leads us to who will be starting at the 3, and also on the other side of that question, who is the closing 3 in that situation? Maybe those answers are different. We can discuss that as we go through here. But Evan, I want to start with one quick thing. Did you see this New York Daily News report from Stefan Bondi about the Knicks feeling as if they didn't get a fair shake in these Donovan Mitchell trade negotiations?
I did not know. I'm not surprised. The Knicks seem to have a bit of a Napoleon complex with the Nets as of late, and they're going to be bad this year. But they kind of shot themselves in the foot based on what was offered for them, though, as well. That's my counterpoint is Mitchell Robinson was included in the trade package initially. The Jazz rebuffed it, so the Knicks extended him. RJ Barrett was included in the trade package initially. The Jazz rebuffed, and the Knicks extended him. The Knicks kind of kept shooting themselves in the foot every step of the way here. So if they didn't feel like they got a fair shake, maybe they should have been a little bit more patient with. I mean, yes, I understand the pressure of having to extend the in-house talent and kind of retain what you have without burning all bridges. But if Donovan Mitchell's your guy, you try to find a way to make it work before you start negotiating with the trade pieces in good faith.
Or just throwing all the picks if you're the team that has the pick advantage. I don't know what to say. That's just like very like funny leakage. And I know like there was some frustration on the Jazz side just in terms of like the Knicks were sort of openly recruiting Donovan Mitchell by like sending people there, and there's the CEA thing. I'm like, I'm sure this isn't like the funnest thing, but like it what is done, and Donovan Mitchell plays for the Cavs now, and the Knicks can like feel they want about it. Also worth noting that there is a Cavs-Knicks connection here because Brock Goller is an assistant GM with the Knicks. He used to be the Cavs cap guy, very close to Dan Gilbert. So, like, I wonder what his take on all of this is, considering his connection to both sides. All right, let's move on to talking about small forwards. Segment 1 is going to be about Caris LeVert. Segment 2 is going to be about Isaac Okoro. Segment 3 is going to be a bit of a speed round where we look at Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, and then other options that maybe aren't on the roster now or maybe are and we have to look at a new light post this trade. But to start with LeVert, Evan,
okay,
this one makes sense to me from an offensive perspective. It is a very offensive tilt in the starting five if you were to go this way. Provides ball handling that I could see being compelling. We'll get, but maybe not as much as you might think in some ways in my mind. 6'5" or 6'6", 205 per NBA.com. So like theoretically it has the size to kind of play the wing. I guess my reaction to him as a possible starting 3 is one of I don't get the total fit with him, Garland, and Mitchell, just in the sense that I think there are better ways to maximize what LeVert is if you're having Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and maybe Evan Mobley doing more stuff with the ball in year 2.
So just at the top, I understand, like you said, I understand the argument for Caris LeVert in terms of just offensive upside. I have concerns just defensively on how this fit will work, and it's going to be tough with him, Mitchell, and Garland sharing the floor on the perimeter. Like, you're going to be asking a lot, especially out the gates, from Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, where, you know, expectations are a little heightened and things are a little bit different this time around as well. And I like the fit. I guess it makes sense, especially if Isaac Okoro just hasn't improved as a shooter heading into the beginning of the season or possibly even training camp. But I have my concerns. I have my reservations. I don't think the Cavs would ever consider like putting Mitchell at the 3, Garland at the 1, and starting like another guard next to them in some capacity. Like let's say like Rubio's healthy and they try to line up like that instead. That's a possibility, but I just think the defensive concerns just aren't worth the offensive upside because LeVert also isn't like a plus shooter. Like he isn't going to keep defense. Like he'll keep defenses probably more honest than Isaac Okoro at this juncture based on what we've last seen from both these players. But I also do not think it's really like a viable long-term option. I think the Cavs just try to make this work, and maybe it's more situational. Like maybe there are nights like they're playing a perimeter heavy team, and Isaac Okoro will draw the start over LeVert, or maybe they need to get off to a stronger start offensively, and they want to kind of maximize the off-ball potential of Garland and Mitchell together, with LeVert being the ball handler in some sets. Like that makes sense too. Like there's a lot of interesting ways to go about this. It's just I have my reservations just about LeVert, and a lot of it does come with availability too. Where is he able to stay healthy enough to be a reliable starting 3 for the Cavs next year?
Yeah, I don't think I number one think of him as a 3. And if we're looking at the catch and shoot part of it, the spacing part of it, which is just going to be part of the role of this 3, whoever it is, whether it's LeVert or Okoro or somebody else, whether there's someone they go get long term to fill that spot. So last year he's at 40.6% on catch and shoot threes. That's at 1.6 attempts per game. That's according to NBA.com. You look at that number and you say, great, that works. Historically, that's not what he has been on catch and shoot threes on similar volume. So the last 3 seasons before last year, 33%, 31.6%, and 27.3%. That's not good. That's below Isaac. No. Those are below Isaac Okoro numbers, and there's a lot of fretting, I think, understandably, about Okoro's offensive role and what he is as a shooter. I think the defensive point on your part is also smart because he's not going to cover for them defensively. The point of Okoro would be to say, okay, you can take some of the defensive burden, not just off of these 2 guards, but reduces the pressure on Mobley and Allen to erase everything. That is not what LeVert is going to do. He's going to slash. He's going to do Karis LeVert stuff, attack tonight. So there are going to be times where I could see like the end of a game, they're all 3 on the floor together, and you go all in that way, and you say ball handling, and you make that work. I think if his role is just not so much as like a starting 3, it is like I think he, like Ricky Rubio's job in a lot of ways, will be to provide supplemental ball handling, provide different looks of offense, and provide rest for these 2 guys. It is not to I don't view what his optimal thing to do would be to really compliment them. So I can understand how you make this choice if you're JB Bickerstaff and the coaching staff. Yeah. It is not one that like totally jumps out to me as like an obvious fit.
Yeah, it doesn't really jump out as an obvious fit. I think that's just kind of the reality of the situation in terms of wing depth for the Cavs. And as you noted at the top, they have 4 starting spots locked in, and now 3 is going to be a bit of a toss-up. I like what you said in closing situations with LeVert, Mitchell, Garland, and obviously maybe one or both of Mobley and Allen. Like you have ball handling. You have shooting from Mitchell and Garland. You have rim pressure from all 5 of them, but especially Garland, Mobley, and Allen in that capacity. Like that's, and then the 1 through 3 at least are pretty good free throw shooters. Allen and Mobley can be hit or miss, but like if you're providing that rim pressure, if you have guys who are going to go into the line in close game situations, like it's a good problem to have. Just because Isaac Okoro is just so hit or miss at times at the free throw line, so I could see it more so being a closing lineup, and I would like to see Karis LeVert be like a supercharged, a little bit bigger 6-man for the Cavs, where they ask him to come off the bench and maybe he subs in for Garland like midway into the first quarter, and you let Mitchell be like the primary ball handler until you sub in Hollow Neto or eventually Ricky Rubio, or you sub in LeVert and Rubio together in tandem, and Rubio just, works his wizardry on the court to get LeVert going and more comfortable. And I think that's just ideally kind of what you're hoping to get. It's maybe a more self-actualization of what Colin Sexton was before he went down last season, where a better way to utilize Sexton instead of stashing him in the corner and keeping the ball out of his hands is just letting him come off the bench and wreak havoc against another team's bench unit, let him get hot, and then you kind of let him remain the hot hand in certain situations, and you let him close in that capacity then. Like, I like that idea with LeVert and there's obviously, it's not apples to apples between him and Colin Sexton, but there's some similarities in how they play currently. That it could be, it's a lot, that could be, it could, at least I believe it's more viable for him to be closing games versus starting them. Because again, like Brad Seller said on our show, it doesn't matter if you start, it matters if you finish.
Yeah, well, it matters to some guys if they started. That's like the other
fair.
like, does it matter to Carlos over if starts? I also would note that I think it would be worth. I think for us, and I think for people like that are just interested in what this team's going to be, is to maybe go back and watch Levert on defense. He obviously did have some time where like he was, I think, being used in ways where you kind of could see him maybe used in this scenario. I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like in retrospect. Maybe that's something we can discuss in the season preview capsule when we get to that closer to the start of the season. All right, after the break, we're going to move on to Isaac Okoro, who on paper would make some sense, but there are obviously some real concerns there. But first, going to tell everyone about our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar has these Built Bar puffs that are great, and you're depriving yourselves of one of life's greatest joys if you haven't tried them yet. And that includes your new favorite, the cookie dough chunk puff. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They have all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Type really fast on your phone or your browser. You can't run to Built.com like the copy says, but to snag a box for you and the family, it will be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. What's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick protein-filled bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, the fat, the sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCKEDON15, LOCKEDON15. All right, back here on Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dimmerl. Let's talk about Isaac Okoro now. Evan, what do you think of him? Think of him in this context of small forward post Donovan Mitchell trade.
This is the fit I like, because in terms of what you maybe want from Isaac Okoro as a player heading into just this pseudo new era of the Cavs, especially now with Mitchell in tow, where you need a low usage wing who can provide you scoring off the ball, which we saw Isaac Okoro be effective as a slasher. Obviously the big question with him though is the shooting aspect of it all. And if he's like we've talked about so many times now on this show, that if he's a slightly below average or even average 3-point shooter next season, that's going to unlock a lot for the Cavs. But just focusing on the pluses of what we have, he's low usage right now. He's getting still used to not playing with the ball in his hands. That I think having facilitators like Garland and Mitchell as well, and even Mobley in creative situations too, is certainly going to maybe unlock a lot of things for him as an off-ball player. But more than anything, I like his fit because the Cavs kind of view him as a 2, but he has the capacity to defend 1, 2s, 3s, sometimes 4s, just because he's so sturdy and so big and strong, and he's so multifaceted as a defensive player that he can be really helpful, where you can just stick him on the best perimeter player on an opposing team, or you let him kind of be the help defender or coverage provider alongside Mitchell and Garland. Like, you're going to be asking a lot out of him because he's going to have to cover for those two. But I think just with how JB Bickerstaff operates as like a defensive first coach, you can kind of have something harmonious going here with Okoro slowing down the attack on the perimeter, and then you let Mobley and Allen just continue to do the crazy things they did defending the paint and the rim last season, and you kind of figure this out as you go. And again, if Okoro is more than passable offensively, like, that's great. I think that's a huge plus for the Cavs. I think there is something there for him, but he just didn't have the runway to kind of flesh it out and develop because of Cleveland's situation last year. But that's where I'm at, and I'm curious to see where you think. I think he should start, and if he's obviously much better than advertised from last year, he could close. But like now, yeah, I want him as the starter just to kind of help set a rhythm and flow for the other 4 guys on the floor.
Yeah, so I went back and looked at like some of the numbers on him as a 3 versus a 2 last year. So it's a little more than a quarter of his possessions, according to Clean Glass, where he's playing the 3. The most common 2 lineups, one was Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Markkanen, and Mobley. And obviously, Markkanen's gone. That's not a thing. Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Markkanen, Moses Brown was the second most common one. That is also not a thing. The most common one where the closest thing that we can have as a point of comparison, Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Mobley, Allen, and that's the most common one with Allen at the 5 and Okoro with the 3. Only 43 possessions last year according to Clean the Glass. So, like, we don't have like a lot to really go on here in terms of, okay, what does he look like as a 3 with some of these guys? Well, I think you don't necessarily need that to kind of look at this.
I agree.
The biggest concern, as you said, is the offense. So 36.8% at catch and shoot threes last year. That's on 2.1 attempts per game. Took, depending on like what source someone is pulling the data from, took either the most or one of the most open corner threes in the league, and that's because teams just don't respect his shot. 36% according to Clean the Glass on corner threes. That's really well below average for wings. I think if the Cavs were to go this route, Evan, you're hoping for two things. Number one, you're hoping for improvement. You're just hoping that like what he said in his postseason exit interview was like, I know this is about offense for me. I know I have to improve this. And he shows up this year and is a better offensive player. The second thing is that I think you're hoping Mitchell, because he's going to be dynamic on ball, because he's going to attack the rim, because he's going to put maybe, and you're hoping he's opening some other things up. Maybe there's room for more clear room for him to cut, to set some screens, to maybe like that's where the evolution comes, not just from a pure shot making perspective, but also just other stuff happens. Maybe Mitchell and having another really dynamic ball handler all the time helps unlock some of that. That's what I think you're hoping for. It is of the ones that I think are realistic, and as of right now, I would say that's LeVert and Okoro. I think LeVert is the one that is probably a little bit safer because you just kind of know what LeVert is and how to game plan for it. That was kind of I think that's what marketing ended up being, obviously, once we kind of saw how that worked. Okoro was the one you're betting on a year 3 improvement and some other things kind of shaking out to help him not be what he was last year and as a rookie.
Yeah, and I alluded to this soon after the trade was announced by Woj, and then the fallout, kind of what came afterwards when we figured out what the Cleveland gave up overall. Like, Isaac Okoro, I would consider one of the biggest X factors for the Cavs next season. Like, he could really shape a lot for himself personally as a player, and just where his longevity will be in the league, and also just what you're hoping you can get from him overall. Like, I think about this. Yes, Cleveland gave up Ochai Agbaji, but let's say Isaac Okoro went Ochai Agbaji's place. Like, Agbaji, at least if he is a serviceable defender and he's a low usage wing that provides you spot up shooting, just shooting from the perimeter, like, that's what the Cavs gave up at Agbaji. Like, makes a lot of sense as the starting 3 heading into next season next to Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, and Allen. But you have to work with what you have, and like you said, the Cavs might be either firm believers in his offensive development or just kind of where he's come and gone as a player at this point. Or I don't know, like they think they can make it work by having a bit of more of a deeper, stable, just like not multifaceted, but like it's situational based on who they started the 3, and like they have the starting core 4 locked in. So a lot of it does hinge on the offense, and like I've said several times now, if he is a much better shooter heading into this upcoming season, like it's going to do a lot of things for him. It's going to do a lot of things for the Cavs. I think having 2 playmakers on the floor, and Garland and Mitchell, and then Mobley, who has quite a creative touch as well, like it's going to do a lot of things for Okoro off the ball. It's just there's a little bit of uncertainty, and I think it's fair. I think it's warranted that people are uncertain what you're going to get with him offensively, but I'm not really fully ready to give up the ship on Isaac Okoro quite yet, because you see the like if you get the peak of Isaac Okoro where you get some good shooting, you get some good offensive viability, and you mostly get his energy in front of the defensive end, like that's perfect for the Cavs. But we just need to see that on a more consistent and on a more night-to-night basis at this point.
Yeah, and I would note 2 kind of things. Number one, I think the Agbaji, the idealized version of Ochai Agbaji is...
that's what I'm saying. Like, 3-point shootings in deep, like a 3-and-D wing.
Which he, like maybe he's at right away, maybe the 22-year-old thing, but like his history would suggest that like he's probably not going to be there right away. So you're looking for like, if you could go in the future and like get 25-year-old Ochai Agbaji, maybe that's the guy. The other thing about Okoro that I think is worth noting, but hard to really get into in a big way. this is the last year he becomes contract extension eligible after this season. There is I would say, a very, very, very low chance, unless it's like a very team-friendly deal or something, that he gets an extension after the season just because of where the Cavs cap is headed. Unless they could get something locked in that it just makes a ton of sense and and you feel really good about where he is at for this year. Maybe that's how this gets done. But he is heading towards the point in his career where he is now playing for his next. You're always kind of playing for your next contract.
Yeah.
But he is now like going into eligibility zone and eligibility for that next contract. So like, it's starting to get real for him in terms of what the next part of his career post that rookie contract looks like. And the Cavs have real expectations, and like he is one of the guys this year. It's absolutely kind of, I think, under the microscope of what they're building here. Like they have these 4 really, really good players now. They have these 4 all-stars. They have that are all 26 and under. Once Mitchell turns 26 this week, How does he fit in? He's playing for that. He's playing to get paid in that structure as we go forward. All right, let's move on to segment 3 after the break. We're going to go Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens. I guess we're going to talk about Jetty Osman for a brief second because we maybe need to, and we'll talk about maybe some other options to wrap things up. All right, back here in Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Damrell. Evan, this is all I really have to say about Lamar Stevens, who I think is good. I think could make a lot of sense for minutes this year. Makes sense defensively, but he's a worse shooter than Okoro. I don't see how this makes sense.
Again, it's situational. I think if the Cavs try to go like on a game-to-game basis of who to play, maybe if you need a bigger body defender, perhaps, but maybe Stevens gets the 10th man minutes in this rotation and he doesn't start. Let's say you're playing Brooklyn, or possibly you need to slow down James Harden in Philly, or you just want to throw an extra body at like Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday and try and hope for the best against Giannis. Like, yeah, Lamar Stevens makes sense. But like you said, a high energy guy, like he played really well whenever he did start for the Cavs, but just the fact that he's probably, just in terms of wings, he is the worst shooting wing on the Cavs roster currently. Like that's just kind of a non-starter for me because you need some type of spacing to coexist with Mitchell and Garland, as well as Mobley and Allen on the floor offensively.
The only way that changes is if, like, the only way that changes is if Mobley starts like taking a bunch of threes right away and it's really good and that like, but like that is just like.
That's where I'm at. Like, if Mobley comes out like guns blazing this season, like rock on, Cavs. You guys are okay. The start of Okoro or Stevens at the 3.
You could do a lot of whatever you want if Mobley's like 35% from 3 and like taking catch and shoots.
But as you noted, the Cavs getting Donovan Mitchell kind of takes a little bit of pressure off Evan Mobley to like really perform right out the gates offensively. Like he can still kind of ease into things as this Cavs team grows up in real time. So
last year Lamar Stevens, 28% on corner threes, 29% on non-corner threes. That's not going to cut it amid this starting lineup. He's a guy that I think he pair him with Kevin Love, you can have a lot of success. That's not really what I view as like a functional 3. Okay, Dean Wade, 36.2% on catch and shoot threes last year. That's on 2.6 attempts per game, 34% on threes overall. Weirdly, a very low 24% of corner threes, which I just can't imagine is that bad again. We talked about this before, but that just feels like an anomaly. Evan, 64% of his possessions last year were logged as him as a small forward, according to Clean the Glass. In those, it's a little over 1,200 possessions. The Cavs are plus 6.6 per 100 possessions. Now, Wade is not Markkanen. They are different in that Wade is a little shorter. He is a lesser shooter. He maybe is a little more willing to attack closeouts and kind of try to dunk on people. That is something Markkanen doesn't totally always do. Defensively, I think Markkanen used his frame really well. I don't think Wade is gonna do that in the same way. Mm-hmm. I could see them maybe like using him as to throw that look out there if they want to try it again. I don't think this is a viable starting option thing.
Neither do I. I think the last guy, I'm going to throw a name out there after we've talked about the guy after Wade too. But I think, again, Dean Wade played really well in spot minutes when he had to start on Larry Markkanen's behalf as like that weird stretchy 3. Like he had that one game where he was just absolutely bonkers on offense. But that's not what you're going to get from him on a night-to-night basis. Like you said, I think at least if he's fully healthy, because he is coming off a torn meniscus, and based on just what's been reported, and there's very little, it seems like he's going to be fine heading into camp. But see where he's at physically as well. Like, you don't want to like kind of put too much on him right away. He's coming off knee surgery like that. So I could see the fit. The shooting percentage numbers are a little surprising. Like I was expecting more, especially from the corner, just because when you look at Dean Wade, people say like, oh, he's like in a similar vein to Kevin Love or Larry Markkinen, where he's a bigger white guy who can hit threes, but also provide you rebounding. Like, but he is different in the fact that he does possess some lateral quickness. Like he isn't like a ball stopper in terms of just like locking down an opponent on the perimeter, but he also doesn't get completely blown past, and he's able to at least scrap on defense. And I think that won't get you minutes in JP Bickerstaff's rotation no matter what. But yeah, I just don't see it as a viable option, especially because I have my own reservations and questions, but I just don't think it's viable playing him like 25, 30 minutes a night on a night-to-night basis when a guy who's just not used to that altogether.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they do use him as a 3 more than a 4, just like last year, and what that kind of would mean for the rotation. But like,
did say in his exit interviews, the Cavs are asking him to learn how to play the 3. So ditto for Lamar Stevens. Like they're like, yeah, they kind of want us to play 3 full time. Yeah,
well, they already kind of asked Dean Wade to do that last year, and the rebounding numbers don't suggest he rebounds like a 4. Anyway, we'll when we do a Dean Wade season preview podcast, we'll dive into that some more. Cedi Osman, very quickly.
No.
Look, here's the thing.
No.
He just has to, I think, be mentioned here just because he is now one of the few wings they still have on the roster.
Yeah, that's fair, but it's
he hit like last year his 3-point shooting normalized. Like I don't necessarily think this is like one of the lead options, but like his path to minutes, his path to being a functional player is like clearer in a world post Mitchell tree, just because there's like a need for like a little bit of Cedi Osman on the wing, even if like I don't totally know if they like love that.
I agree with that. I think it's just defensively you can't ask him to start. He's going to get shredded. I would rather use Cedi in the vein of last season when they had Ricky. You okay? That sounded like a painful groan, but
that was an itch and a big sip of water.
Okay, like a dog. But when they deployed Ricky Rubio on the floor with Cedi Osman at the same time, like you saw some normalcy with Cedi's numbers. He wasn't so all over the place. Then when Rubio went down, we saw a little bit more of it. I don't know. Maybe him being the 5th banana could be an option in the offensive lineup, but I'd rather let him be a spark plug off the bench. He provides you some shooting and some playmaking at times, but like let's just say he's getting shredded on defense or he's just not providing you any shooting. It's easier to pull the hook if he is like your 8th, 9th, or 10th man than he is as your starting 3 in your lineup, because then you have a lot of issues then to iron out. So I have a few names I want to throw out though.
Well, just the last thing I will say is there's only one option that we've discussed that is like reasonable and like has a defensive pulse, and that's Isaac Okoro, and we'll see if that means anything. If you're gonna say Dylan Windler, I don't think we can do that.
No. It's not Dylan Windler, but I was thinking about the Jonathan Sharks quote that friend of the pod, Jay Kyle Mann, shared on Twitter, where because Evan Mobley has the ability to defend threes, I would say maybe if he really levels up as a player in his sophomore year, like you could have him be one of the perimeter stoppers to help kind of slow down some of the attack that's coming Garland and Mitchell's way. Would you consider a starting 5 of Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, Love, Allen, where you put Love at the 4 and you let him be that 5th option? And obviously he's not going to really, he's still kind of playing that somewhat 6-man role, but now he's in the starting lineup instead. And you put Mobley at the 3 because you're still playing big, but you made a sacrifice giving up Larry Markkinen as your starting 3.
I'm going to say no, just because I think what you maybe are then setting on Mobley to have to do is chase around wings and like burn energy doing that in a way that I don't know if you want to. Like you may turn to that at times or like in a playoff series and say, hey, Evan, like let's have you chase around a Jason Tatum or like someone like that for a little bit just to like throw the look. But like I don't know if that's something you want to like. As good as Evan Mobley is on defense, I don't necessarily think that is like the best use of his talent, and that's just like that is asking so much of him for an 82-game season marathon that's a little much to me.
Yeah, and the tricky thing is for Cleveland is they have one roster spot open right now. They're 1.4 million below the luxury tax threshold, just based on the math I did over the weekend. So
I think let me double check that. I think they're like 2 point something. So I think they can fit a full. I think they can fit a full minimum underneath it.
Okay, but You could talk about like Carmelo Anthony, but I think like just him signing the Celtics after the Gallo injury makes so much sense. But
He's also a 4, so like he's not
also
a 3. He's a 4. Yeah,
I know. But like you could play him on the wing at least, and he provides you shooting, but there's no defense, and that's asking a lot of Mobley and Allen in that regard then too. So the Cavs still do not have a high quality starting wing, but I agree with Chris's take. I just think a guy with a defensive pulse who has some questions that need to be answered in terms of offensive ability. I think I'm willing to take that gamble with Isaac Okoro than I am Karis LeVert, just because you have enough offensive firepower in that starting lineup to begin with. You need some defense to kind of keep a counterbalance so every game isn't a track meet for 82 games this season.
I have it at 2.4. Spot Track has it at 2.471. So they have they will probably whatever they do. We're gonna do an episode on the 15th roster spot. Like, is that a veteran? Is that a young guy, rehabilitation guy? Is that like a two-way guy that you just want to convert now and throw on the roster? Like, there's ways you could approach this and pros and cons to all of them.
Dude, it's so cool. Evan Mobley and Isaiah Mobley let out the USC football team.
That is among the 3 college football things I consumed all weekend. Ohio beating Florida Atlantic, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Evan Mobley and Isaiah Mobley doing that.
I watched Akron barely beat an FCS team. I consumed Ohio State, Notre Dame, and had on the LSU game, and I watched Brian Kelly lose, and it was good.
Yes.
It was good.
The other thing, I have one basketball-y thing I'm going to hit on before we go. The last thing I just want to say on small forwards. This is clearly if you're looking at something that the Cavs could make a trade for, aka use Karis LeVert's contract, use Jetty Osman's contract, use some of the second-round picks they have to go get a veteran who a team wants to move on from, use the MLE next summer. In some way, this is very, very clearly the spot they will try to find an option. And I think because of Evan Mobley in particular, there's flexibility in what they could look for. I think this was this was also the case with I think the spot that now Donovan Mitchell is filling is the Darius Garland backcourt mate. They were looking for different kinds of players based on who's available. Yeah. I would suspect the scope of what they're looking for, aside from the shooting aspect, maybe they prefer something over something else, like a bulkier guy versus a not bulkier guy or whatever. I think they have the flexibility to look for different kinds of threes as we go forward here, and I would suspect that will be the case. All right, here's one basketball thing, because, brother, I'm actually getting very geared up to talk some actual basketball in practical terms as we get closer to the season. I was watching the Storm Aces game from over the weekend. I'm going to clip this below because I'm going to explain it poorly. But the Aces, with just under 7 seconds left in the fourth, ran an ATO to get Asia Wilson the ball at the top of the key. She pump fakes, drives, goes back to her left hand and gets a bucket. Pure skill. If I am Evan Mobley's trainers and I am the Cavs, I am putting this in my playbook, because he's going to be able to, once his handle gets tighter, listen to the Jackson Frank episode I did last week on Evan Mobley, because it kind of got lost in the ether of Donovan Mitchell, understandable. We talked about this kind of thing specifically. What Asia Wilson does here is if Mobley can have the not necessarily even just make threes, but have a threat of a 3-point shot and develop the handle. There is stuff you can do with him late in games that will take pressure off of Garland, take pressure off of Mitchell, and also just continue to make him more special. I watched this clip and was at first Asia Wilson, you're incredible basketball. You were very fun to watch too. They should be showing Evan Mobley this clip. That's it.
Yeah, they should. I watched the clip in the script before we talked. I'm ooh, that is spicy. But yeah, I got that Jackson Frank episode too.
Yeah, it is.
It's very good. And like Chris said, it got buried in the ether of one Spider Mitchell spinning his web in Cleveland. And as a Spider hater, I'll learn to get over it.
Yeah. I'm not a Spider person either, but alas. All right, that is going to be it for today. We're going to be back tomorrow with part 2 of our all-time bidding draft. Hope you join us for that, and check out part 1 if you have not already for more Donovan Mitchell stuff this week. We're going to talk, I think David Ramil from Locked On Heat is going to come through. We're going to talk about the bloodbath that is going to be the Eastern Conference next season, because good Lord, that is going to be a highly competitive group. And we're going to talk about what the Cavs could do to fill out their 15th roster spot now that they have one, and how they could approach filling that spot. We will note if they do some kind of Donovan Mitchell press conference call, Kobe, like if they do some kind of media availability around this trade, that will be an episode as well, and we'll bump one of those to next week. But TBD on when that may or may not be at this point. Evan, any final thoughts before I read one last thing we get out of here?
No, not particularly. I'm doing the Velosano this Saturday, so if you want to donate, the link's at the top of my Twitter bio, or my Twitter page, I should say.
I'll put it. It'll be in the show notes below if you're interested.
Thanks, brother. If you have been impacted by cancer, know anyone else who has been, it's touched a lot of us. We're not going to cure it this year. I don't think we're going to cure it next year either, but we're going to get closer to kicking it to the curb for good. But other than that, as Chris said, if there's a Donovan Mitchell presser, hopefully one of us are there so we can provide some live coverage too, and then we can use footage and everything else during that and the show. But yeah, it's exciting times to kind of be talking about the Cavs. Thanks to everyone who checked out the first part of our player draft. That was fun. I think taking Sean Marion through a couple people for the loop, at least some people who reached out who listened today told me that it did. So that was fun.
Took me for a loop in real time, brother.
Yeah, it sure did. So thanks everyone for checking us out. Subscribe to us on YouTube. A lot of you are probably watching, probably aren't subscribed, so you could fix that real quick by clicking that button. But Chris, what do you want to say before we head out?
Number one, I don't understand why they didn't give. How did Isaiah Mobley get a USC jersey and Evan Mobley's wearing a Burberry t-shirt? How did that happen? Evan, wear a jersey. Live in the moment, my guy. Secondly,
maybe it's an Evan thing. I'm not a jersey guy either. As someone who wore them too much in college, they're all packed away, and I will never wear a jersey ever again.
Just respect to running out to the USC football team in a Burberry jersey. That kind of rocks in some ways, but also just get the jersey. All right, now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey NFL Insiders are all combining into one Ultimate NFL Preview. Search Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, we'll be back tomorrow. I'm Chris. That's Evan. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing this episode. What?
That Ultimate NFL show is probably going to give me insight on why Mitchell Trubisky is a team captain but not starting.
Money Mitch, Mentor Zone. Jake Stevens, salute to you, everyone. Be well.